Welcome to Bounce Around Charleston. I'm Randolph Miller. Coming up in today's show, citizens from across this country will converge upon our nation's capital to commemorate and celebrate the historic March on Washington, which occurred 50 years ago on August 28, 1963. Here to talk more about it with me are Bill Saunders and Reverend Thomas Nesbitt Jr. And coming up later in the show, Closing the Gap in Healthcare presents the Low Country Jazz Festival with the Dr. Thaddeus Bell. He will be here to tell us more about it, and you don't want to miss a wonderful jazz performance by musician Charlton Singleton and his group. Now, August 28, 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called for an end to racism in the United States. He delivered to over 250,000 civil rights supporters from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. The speech was a defining moment of the American civil rights movement. It was entitled, I Have a Dream. Mr. Bill Saunders, Reverend Nesbitt, 50 years later, here we are to commemorate that celebration. What do you have to say about that?
Well, again, you know, there were so many things happening on that time. I really would like to give some credit to Bayard Rustin, who really put that march together. I saw that name, yes. Well, yeah, nobody really gives him the credit, but he's the one who did the heavy lifting for that march to happen. And so there was a lot of things that were going on. I think that the I Had a Dream speech was something that made a lot of difference to a lot of people. Later on in my life, even after that, I had some problem with it. But I'll talk about that in a little bit.
Well, now, you know, I was doing some reading and some research, and I found out that that was really not the speech that he was supposed to give that day.
And not only that, the speech that he made was at Reverend C.L. Franklin Church in Detroit a year earlier that he did I Have a Dream speech. And so that some changes was made to it to do delivering. But Dr. King was so good at speaking. No matter what he said, he would impress you.
Okay.
It was good.
And now, Reverend Thomas Nesbitt Jr., we were told that you were actually there.
That is correct. I was 17 years old at the time. I was a rising senior at Burke High School, August 28th, 1963. And I was actually at Camp Moultrie, which is in Mounts Corner, South Carolina. I was a Boy Scout at the time.
Okay.
And my grandfather came up to the camp. It was earlier in the summer, and said, the preacher, meaning at that time that was Reverend,
50 years ago.
50 years ago, that's correct, that's correct. Zedekiah Lizette Grady.
Okay.
Reverend Grady was my pastor at the time. And he came up with my grandfather and said they want to send me to the March on Washington.
Wow. And
they wanted to know if it's all right for me, you know, to go.
What kind of an impact did it have on your life?
Well, I was 17 years old, a rising senior, and I felt privileged, actually. I felt that this was a magnificent opportunity to see something and do something that will probably never ever happen again in my life. And I felt that this was something that I should not miss. So after Boy Scout camp was over and we came back home and we got settled, and my grandfather took me to Columbia, South Carolina, where we took a bus along with many other people my age, and we stopped at several places picking up folk along the way.
To go to the
march. That's correct, to go to the march. And this is all, again, attributed to Reverend Grady. He had the foresight and the kindness to volunteer my name to go, and he thought that it would be a pretty good experience for me, and it turned out to be a wonderful experience.
But now thank you, sir. They're saying that over 250,000 people converged on that mall. That had to have been a wonderful sight for Dr. King to walk out and see that many people there. What do you think?
It was. Keep in mind now, 250,000 people. When we got there, we went to the mall where the Washington Monument is. We departed the bus there, and it was a situation where they had water for us and some light lunch, but there were people arriving from all over the world.
Okay.
250,000 people, 250,000 people. So they had to keep us as we came into those locations together so people wouldn't get separated from their core group. But to make a long story short, it was simply a grand sight, a beautiful sight. I was 17 years old, but I had the feeling that this was something that would never ever happen again.
Okay.
And it was simply magnificent to walk down Constitution Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue, holding signs and holding placards and being a part of the song singing and We Shall Overcome. And now with that many people, I wasn't able to get close to the reflection pool, or reflective pool.
Okay.
But as Dr. King stood looking toward the east, I was to his left, 200-300 yards away.
Wow.
But the point is, in the proximity of the great man.
Okay. Now, thank you, sir. The march was about jobs and freedom. So now, Mr. Saunders, how do you feel that went off that day?
Well, you know, we can still look at it today. It's still a part with you being here, these young people being here at the station. In 1963, Channel 5 and none of the TV stations hired black as on-air people. But after that march in 1970, we from Cobra filed a lawsuit against Channel 5 and stopped their license for a year. And that's how it began to hire. Loretta Mazan got hired right after that. So that whole thing was a motivating thing. It caused a lot of people, no matter where you were, whether you was at the march or whether you was at home, it moved people to believe that, yes, I can. And I can put my life on the line for what I believe in, and it made all that difference.
Because they said Dr. King went up there, in essence, to make sure that they understood we are no longer to be called second-class citizens, but we wanted equality. And so now, here's what I read also, that before he got there, one writer wrote on the website I read that he was late getting to the march for meeting with the politicians, and said that he came out there all just motivated to give this speech because after meeting with the politicians, he felt that he had made an impact on them. What do you think?
Well, I think he have. And of course, he had so many good people with him. Mahalia Jackson, who was one of the moving person and one of his spiritual person that
and she sang the song, How I Got Over.
Yes, yes, he did. So, yeah, he was ready for that, although it seemed like Reverend Nesbitt was there, but you know, it was sort of flagrant for a while, and then they said, you better go on and make the speech, because you're going to lose the audience. And
All right.
And King did it.
Well, you hold that thought, and we'll be right back after we take this break.